The Dental Brief is brought to you by Omni Premier Marketing and the amazing guests who bring wisdom and advice that you can put to use to take your business and practices to the next level. Find us on Facebook and join the conversation. Get ready to grow because we are kicking off the next episode in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dental Brief. I'm excited for today's guest. I believe this is his third, if not fourth time on the program. Always brings a ton of value and information to our listeners. Dr. Bryan Laskin, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for having me. It's always great talking with you and just love what you're doing for the profession. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you and you giving back a little bit about your background as I know it. When people ask me if I know you, I say, oh yeah, that's the guy that was a dentist that turned into a tech guru. Does that seem pretty fair?
That's pretty fair. Yeah, I think, yes. And I think in that journey, really uncovered what I think are some issues, systemic issues in the dentistry that others haven't seen. So really working on leveraging technology and also writing standards to help guide the direction of the industry, hopefully in a positive way, to put patients first.
Yeah, let's talk about the industry. First, your website, it's ToothApps.com. Check it out. I know you've got a new launch coming up here real soon, so our listeners should be seeing that new site. Let's talk about dentistry and healthcare today. What's going on out there? What are you seeing?
A lot. I think so. Right now, I think dentistry is going through a systemic shift. That happens. It seems to happen, every couple decades or so. When I got out of dental school 25 years ago, we were going through a similar shift. The shift was from analog dentistry to digital dentistry. And right now we're making a shift from digital dentistry to what I call connected dentistry, in particular, connecting practices, connecting to our medical colleagues, medical dental connections, connecting with our patients much more directly, remote care. And so specifically in healthcare, I think dentistry is going to play a much larger role. We can talk about that. And also within dentistry, breaking down the barriers that have been either artificially placed in our industry or just habitually been propagating, I think is going on in a big way.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that, analog dentistry, there's still improvements in chairs and composites and adhesives and that kind of thing. There's still going to be improvements in digital dentistry, but where this industry, I think, is headed is towards interconnection.
Yeah. What's the interconnection look like?
Well, I think it starts off with what we've been working hard at for 3 years at ToothApps, which is word that is still not that well known in dentistry, which is interoperability or connecting our systems. The data is such a huge role of the care that we provide, and I think it's under recognized. If we're going to do treatment to drive revenue, we have to come to a diagnosis, and that relies on having information about patients. And
sure.
Frankly, our information systems have been complete garbage. You get a new patient come to your office and you get no information about them, yet you're still supposed to come up with a comprehensive treatment plan without any history, without any radiographic history, progress notes, and that's about to change. And I think so that's how it starts. But I also think that this has been a trend that's been going on for a while, aggregating practices through DSOs and more group practice. I think the sort of tail end is what a lot of people are talking about that I'm hearing, the medical dental integration, which I think is vitally important. But let's face it, we have to get our stuff together in dentistry and have this interconnectedness within dentistry or maybe before. We can't put the cart before the horse. We have to get our connections. If you can't send an X-ray to your endodontist easily that they can see,
right?
We should fix that problem before bringing in the medical history from Epic and Cerner and all of that, which frankly, we're doing both of those things. But I think, if we truly believe, as I do, that dentistry and medicine are going to be more connected, we have a lot of work to do in our industry to get up to the level of medicine.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I know that you're solving this. This is like kind of your passion, one of the things that you're working on. But why hasn't it happened sooner? It seems like the profits are in keeping this separate, right? There's in dentistry, practice management softwares. I mean, I have no idea how many there are. I mean, there's obviously the 5 or 6 big players, and then there's a whole bunch of other ones that are out there. I mean, I just heard of, one of our clients is switching to a new one that I just heard about yesterday that I've never heard about before. How does that kind of work with capitalism, right? So you have all these different companies that are trying to build a better product, and then also these connecting with each other and speaking. So what is this problem, and how does this problem come about, and how do we solve this?
Yeah, I think it's come about just by the way we digitize our systems, right? You mentioned practice management systems. I mean, that's kind of an archaic concept in my mind. What happened with practice management systems is we had a paper chart. When I got out of dental school, I was writing in with my absolutely horrific handwriting. I was scribbling around, and my poor team members would have to read my scribblings. And frankly, I probably couldn't read them myself half the time.
Sure.
And so let's put this on a computer, right? And then we put our charting on the computer and say, hey, now we can do billing, and we started adding some features. But then if you look back, the way we did it, it wasn't, our systems weren't designed for technology that's available today. There were modifications of archaic systems that we had, right? And that's been propagated through the industry. Then, as you alluded to, some people made a lot of money doing that, right? And sometimes I think that there's sort of the lack of vision. Sometimes there's not a lot of incentive to make the change. And then a lot of times there are people who just think that, well, we can lock this down and profit from it, right? And so there's not been, but I think overall, I don't think the industry ever lifted their heads out of their loops and said, hey, there's a better way, right?
Right.
And I think that's kind of what, as you mentioned, I've kind of gone from being a high level dental provider, running very efficient practices, to developing systems to help the industry. I kind of view that's one of the sort of unique positions that we have in the industry is bringing together like-minded dental professionals to come up with systems that make sense. Look at the average software company in dentistry, and you can probably count on none of your hands or on none of your feet how many dentists or dental professionals that know how to run a dental practice actually work there. It's a software engineer, right?
Right.
Who's creating a tool that they think might make sense, or frankly, some financial analyst at a large dental organization says, I think we should build this feature. And then, there's just not a lot of thoughtful application of technology in dentistry because there's not people that transition from dental care into creating technology that often.
Right.
And I have the lack of hair on my head to probably prove that might not be a bad choice for people to stay out of it.
Sure.
I love doing it, but it's not for everybody. Right.
Yeah, it's definitely a slippery slope. And I think you're right. We do see a lot of people who have never, ever even stepped foot in a practice outside of being a patient, and then maybe not even as a patient, and they're all of a sudden trying to solve these problems and sometimes creating problems that didn't exist in the future. Or in the past. Let's talk a little bit about ToothApps a little bit. Sure. It's fascinating to me. We've had long conversations about this. Tell me what ToothApps is and what it does.
So ToothApps is really solving the problems that we're talking about. So we connect all the systems in dentistry, make it so you can, really make it so that it doesn't matter what system you're using. You have full agency over the information, which I think is vitally important. And so we make systems just communicate natively. We can also connect. We speak the same language as Epic and Cerner, so we can actually connect dentistry to medicine. So we can actually bring in the medical history from the physician to be viewable within the dental practice. And then also, I think very importantly, that's my huge passion of mine, is engaging patients and giving patients access to their information and empowering them. And we've just launched our latest platform, which is called CAIR, CAIR. And that is a way for your dental patients to be able to securely message your office, pay their bill, online scheduling. They can request their records and obtain them so that when that new patient comes to your office, they can actually take their comprehensive dental record and share it with you.
Wow.
So we're solving these problems holistically from the perspective of connecting all the systems in dentistry, and then also giving patients the power to have that information portable. And if, one of my things I like pointing out is that in dentistry, HIPAA is well known. It's known for the privacy rule and the security rule. These are rules to make information private and secure. However, the theme of HIPAA, what it stands for, is the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. So
Right.
while we have HIPAA trainers coming into our offices, training us about HIPAA every single year, nobody points out the fact that we're not actually doing what HIPAA is supposed to do, which is making this
Right.
information portable. And that's the
Right.
one primary thing that we're solving at ToothApps. And
So-
because then there's a lot of things that we can do beyond that, including showing the probability that a patient's going to show up for their appointment, and doing lots of streamlining of your dental practice, just making some really smart technology to make the operations of a dental practice way easier.
Yeah, that's awesome. The reality is, and I think a lot of people don't know this, and maybe I'm even mistaken about this, but I believe the patients actually own their data. Isn't that correct? Like, it is absolutely their ownership,
correct,
regardless of where that's being stored.
Yes. And there's a lot of rights that patients have that we are ignoring.
Right.
Yeah, the dental record is legally owned by patients. And what's interesting is dental practices, including large groups like DSOs, have a responsibility, because they have stewardship of this information. So they have a responsibility to maintain the integrity of this data, which is being violated in, I'd say, the average dental practice. So it puts dental practices at risk.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Just one crazy lawyer away from a major civil suit there. I could see that happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think it's on the surface, how information is obtained and shared and stored and all of that is probably the most boring topic in dentistry until you peel the onion back a bit and
Right.
recognize that this is core to how we deliver care. And I think it's the biggest problem in dentistry. And I think it's also the biggest opportunity. You know, it's often said the biggest problems are the biggest opportunities. And by that, I mean, when you give patients access to their information, they make better decisions, right? When you have a patient that has a $20,000 treatment plan, that's not a spur of the moment decision for most people, right? They have to have access to the information, talk it over with their spouse, get third-party financing. They might want to ask some questions when they go home, right? Being able to do that through a mobile application is how people consume today, right? Most taco stands have an application where you can directly look at the menu and whatever. I mean, shouldn't your practice? So I think it's an opportunity.
Yeah, that is interesting. The dry cleaners that I go to, you know, has what the cost is for laundry, what it is for starch, extra starch. I mean, it's all right there. 2 day, 1 day, pricing's all there. And I think that is an issue in healthcare, that in general, there's no transparency in pricing. And I think that happens in dental practices too. And I understand that there should be ranges. I want to ask you this question. Cost. So making all these connections, there's certainly a cost involved in that. There's a cost to do this. There's APIs involved, what have you. But when it comes right down to it, I do think that most patients would pay an extra buck, maybe $2 or $3 per visit, to have access to their information if you break it down like that. Do you see that? I mean, is that one of the objections that dentists have, is that it's cost?
Legally, you can't charge patients for obtaining their electronic information because it's theirs. Now, if you're doing paper, there's nominal charges you can charge, which I frankly wouldn't, can get in trouble. But if a patient requests their information electronically, you're required by law to give it to them and without charging them. So I agree, but but certainly I think it's still worth it. And you brought up a great point about this isn't free. Moving data can get expensive, but it's being done already, right? If you have any system that plugs into your practice management software, that behind the scenes, the software vendor's paying that practice management software vendor for access to that API. The problem is that usually that isn't a secure, probably secure, but it's not. They're not doing things that should be done, like focusing, we'll get deep in the weeds here, but not determining the medical necessity of that vendor needing the information, right? Most of these APIs are archaic. If you're a software vendor, they don't work well. And also as a steward, as a dentist who has stewardship of this data, they're not maintaining the integrity of the patient's data the way they should. They're not asking a marketing company, do you need to have access to that information about the patient? They're just charging more for people to get access to it, which is, violates the regulation. So this doesn't cost any more. In fact, having a standardized API for the entire industry that is standardized meaning run through the standard development process, which is an open forum, anybody can give feedback on, and accredited by ANSI. Actually, I think will lower the cost of this data management. Now,
Right.
as
Over time.
we move forward, we're managing more data, so it will get more expensive, right?
Right.
Moving STL files and things like that gets more expensive. But that's all
Right.
just how that doesn't increase the overall cost. It's just that the utilization will increase, which I think is better for the entire industry.
Right. Yeah. And just to clarify, I wasn't suggesting that you actually have a surcharge to the patient. What I was suggesting is that patients will pay more money in general for better service, for better quality of care when it's offered to them. I think that's my belief.
By the way, I think you were 100% correct. I didn't mean to dismiss that this is valuable to patients, monetarily, or if just they go seek offices that are doing this. I just wanted, because this is new information for a lot of people. So,
sure.
I think it's important to point out, because a lot of dentists, when we're talking about this, say, how much can I charge patients? Because you could, but it's just not legal, right?
Right. Yeah. One thing is, kind of switching topic here just a little bit before we wrap up, is you know that people that see a lot of specialists, for instance, in medicine, right? They go to maybe a dermatologist and an otolaryngologist, primary care, and maybe a podiatrist, right? Or something along those. They may have 4 different portals that they got to log into and keep track. They have 4 different sets of passwords that all require, 16 digits in them or something ridiculous like that. It's a pain. I mean, it's a real pain for people. I think adding a dentist and then maybe an orthodontist or a periodontist or an OMS on top of that makes it even worse. So I think what you're doing is brilliant. And I think, you're way out in front. A little bit about ToothApps. People want to learn more information about how you can help them and their practice. And additionally, or I said more importantly, their patients. Check out ToothApps.com. What's a demo look like? What's getting to know you guys and what you do look like for our listeners?
Yeah, it's easy. Starting off with a 15-minute phone conversation, basically, just where you can be video conference or phone. I mean, just going to the website, looking around, we have a lot of information there. But then, the best thing to do is to reach out. We can basically help evaluate the technology that you have today and the best steps to move forward. I personally think, because most practices don't have a patient-facing application, and that is incredibly inexpensive, mandated by federal law, basically by proxy. I think that having an application for your practice is in the rearview mirror is going to look like the biggest increase in case acceptance since the invention of the intraoral camera. When it comes to technology, there's all sorts of phenomenal technologies out there, but let's face it, some are easier to implement, have more impact on your patient's experience, and therefore have a much bigger ROI. If you're looking at, I have a 3D printer, I have CT scan, I have every piece of technology out there, but simple ones like, putting payments on your website or through a mobile application, they might not be as sexy, but they're going to have a much more core improvement on your practice, because they speak to what patients want, which is convenience.
Right. Yep. 100%. Dr. Bryan Laskin, ToothApps.com. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you.
Thanks for all you do, and thanks for having me back. Appreciate it.